Let me just first say good afternoon and welcome for joining us today during this wonderful virtual conference. You have joined the session called Advancing Practice for Permanency, a collaboration between child welfare and mental health. And it is sponsored by the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative. And we'll share a little bit more about that as we move forward in the presentation. I'm Edna Davis-Brown. I'm an implementation specialist for the National Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative. And it's at the Center for Adoption Support and Education, CASE, primarily based out of Burtonsville, Maryland, in terms of their main office. My wonderful co-presenter today is my colleague and implementation specialist, Lisa Maynard, and she'll be chiming in soon. I'm based out of my home in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Lisa is in cool Rochester, New York. So today we're just so pleased to share information about NTI and most importantly, provide a look at how child welfare, mental health, and mental health professionals can work together to enhance permanency and well-being for children and families. So before we take a look at the agenda, and I guess we just have 17 people. I don't know if we need to do the poll or not, but maybe not, Lisa.
Okay.
Why don't in the chat box, let's do this. In the chat box, guys, we'd like to know your role and your agency and share one thing that brings you joy. So if you don't mind typing a bit in the chat box, your agency, your role, and maybe this where you're from. And one thing that brings you joy. You already know the agency and our role, so I guess we need to talk about what brings us joy on our end, huh, Lisa? So we need to model that behavior.
Family. Pam says, welcome, Pam.
Somebody says sunshine and heat.
That was me.
That was you. Oh, okay, you're in New York. I should have known.
Me too. Jessica is the substance use disorder program lead. She loves pets and other animals. Hi, Teresa. In Boston, family-driven practice.
Great.
Melissa from Allegheny, Pennsylvania. Tiffany from Chenango Health Network. Fur babies and people and family. Everywhere I find joy, that's beautiful. Martha, Pennsylvania, family support partner. Singing brings you joy. Well, you connect with Edna. Edna always sings in our presentations. I love it. Nevada, Las Vegas. What brings me joy is family health and learning. A grant writer in New Jersey. Your daughter brings you joy. Thank you, Eileen. Camus, family coordinator in Durham. Camping. Okay.
Yeah, I went to UNC Greensboro, UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm from North Carolina, so I know Durham well.
Hazeline from New Jersey. Gardening brings me joy. I love gardening too. Usually means springtime in upstate New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you to everybody for playing along.
So excellent. Thank you, Lisa. So let's go to the next slide. So we've had the welcome and introductions. We'll do a brief overview of NTI, and we'll have a tale of not 2, but 3 NTI sites. Really looking at 3 sites, Texas, Oklahoma, and Massachusetts, who are implementing NTI and really addressing or talking about enhancing collaboration and creating shared language to really address the unique challenges of foster, adoptive, guardianship, and kinship care families. And we'll talk about integrating NTI itself. How do you access it? What tools do we have to support it, etc.? So, and I think you already have done this. Haven't we done this already? So
Yeah,
we'll
we did.
keep it moving, keep it on push. The learning objectives today. At the end of the session, we hope participants will be able to identify examples of how the NTI training knowledge and skills can be applied in child welfare and mental health organizations. We hope that you will be able to demonstrate an understanding of the value of the collaboration between child welfare and mental health professionals to promote permanency and well-being for children, youth, and families. And finally, assess the benefit of integrating NTI into your organizational training process, training sort of menu. So tell me in the chat box, guys, what do you know about NTI? I know nothing. I heard about it somewhere. I heard about it and started it. I heard, started, and completed NTI and got listed in the national directory. Somebody said it is a disaster, LOL.
Oh no, why? Don't know nothing, know nothing, know nothing.
Okay.
All right. So Michelle, please let us know why it's a disaster.
Oh.
We use it in Kentucky.
Oh, that's Michelle Cunningham. Okay. Yeah, I've been working with Kentucky on getting it off the ground there. Nothing at all. So we have a lot of folks who really know nothing about NTI. We've got a clean canvas to work with, but I still want to hear about that disaster. I'm going to need to follow up with her. So we've got a clean canvas, seems like, Lisa, to work from. Just a few people. I know nothing. Okay.
Okay, so Michelle says that the kids hated it and were not engaged. Okay, so I'm thinking that you might be thinking about something else, that the kids struggled to stay engaged. This is not a training for children. This is for child welfare and mental health professionals. So we might be talking about two different things, Michelle.
Yeah. This is an online training totally for professionals. It is not geared towards children. And also, it is not designed for parents, although pieces of it are certainly relevant to use with parents. And there are some parents who are also professionals and in this sort of area. This was what kids were using. Oh, I'm not sure what you're referencing, Michelle. I have no idea. Oh, okay, a different training.
Maybe we can connect with you outside of this workshop, Michelle.
Yeah, because this is totally not for kids. Okay.
Yeah. Perhaps, Michelle.
Oh, you're talking about Zoom. Are you talking about Zoom? Well, that's another story. Okay. Well, okay. All right, Michelle. But anyway, let's talk about what the Center for Adoption Support and Education is. Sorry about those experiences with Zoom. Okay. Michelle is funny. The Center for Adoption Support and Education, CASE, was created in 1998 to provide post-adoption counseling and education services to families in Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. It is a private nonprofit adoption services agency envisioning that everyone touched by and adoption has access to the adoption competent support necessary to navigate their lifelong journey. When we talk about NTI, or the Adoption Competency Mental Health Training Initiative, and we'll heretofore call it NTI, builds upon the firm foundation of unique experiences and core values of CASE. To learn more about CASE, its mission and goals, visit www.adoptionsupport.org. And through our work, we've seen a need for change in how we address the mental health needs of children. The Children's Bureau grant was an opportunity to do this, and NTI was funded by the Children's Bureau. So Lisa will talk more about NTI.
Right. Okay. So the Center for Adoption Support and Education was awarded a 5-year collaborative research initiative to the Children's Bureau to create and implement a web-based training for mental health and child welfare professionals throughout the United States. NTI aims to enhance the capacity of professionals to understand and address the mental health challenges of children and youth in guardianship, adoption, and foster care. And so this was established in, as Edna said, in 5 years ago, well, actually 7 years ago now, and we've gotten some supplemental funding since then to continue our good work. It's the tools and resources built into NTI are free. In fact, all of the trainings through NTI are free. They're web-based, they're self-paced, and again, I will say they are free. That's been a real benefit to child welfare and mental health professionals across the US. There are two separate curriculum. One is for child welfare and the other is designed for mental health professionals. The child welfare curriculum is 20 hours. There are 8 interactive learning modules that are focused on casework practice. There are an additional 5 hours for supervisors. So the supervisors take the exact same training, but with 5 additional hours that really talk to transfer of learning, how to take the components that are taught inside of the child welfare curriculum and bring that into day-to-day practice. The child welfare curriculum is NASW approved for 20 credits for the child welfare staff and 25 for supervisors. The mental health curriculum is 30 hours with coaching sessions as an option. There are 10 interactive modules that focus on clinical practice. So these two are very well aligned, complementary trainings with the same information and basically the same modules, but mental health has a more clinical focus. It also includes 2 additional modules on assessment, treatment strategies through an adoption lens. It also has in the mental health curriculum 12 evidence-based treatment interventions that can be utilized. We're not training on those, and we'll talk a little bit about what those models are. It's not a training on those models. For instance, 357 by Darla Henry, EMDR, TheraPlay, and so on. But we do provide links and resources for those. The mental health curriculum is approved for 25 continuing education credits by NASW. This is a listing of our key competencies. As I said, that they're not identical, the trainings, but they are complementary. And it's just, again, a little list of our competencies. So let's talk a little bit about why specialized training is needed. Because of traumatic life experiences and early losses, many children who are adopted, who are in guardianship or in foster care experience elevated risks for developmental, health, emotional, and behavioral challenges. The impact of these experiences and challenges compromise well-being and family stability. For example, these problems are magnified by the fact that many behavioral health professionals do not receive adequate training in the needs of foster care, adoption, and guardianship. The loss is an inherent part of all foster care, adoption, guardianship. All these kids have lost somebody, right? And because loss is a common experience, people usually expect and receive acknowledgement about that loss and help in grieving. So, for example, if a parent dies or an aunt or an uncle, there's usually some sort of ritual around that, depending on your cultural and religious beliefs. Whether it's a wake or a funeral or a celebration of life, there's a recognition of that loss. But in adoption, foster care, guardianship, we don't usually sort of ritualize those losses. They're glossed over because the family becomes, the new family takes care of the child, right? But that loss is really, really important to recognize. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
So NTI advances practice for permanency and well-being. What we've set out to do, and I think we have accomplished with NTI, is to support children in healing from trauma and loss, Provide parents with skills and tools and strategies to parent more effectively, to feel more confident and competent in their parenting, and to improve child and family well-being and increase family stability. So Edna, tell us a little bit about how Texas is using NTI.
Great, thank you, Lisa. As I said before, we'll share a tale of three states who have implemented or are implementing NTI. And Texas, the big state of Texas, is one of those states. We'll start with an overview of the experience with NTI in the state of Texas. They're currently using Kaplan, which is the online system to access NTI through the Children's Bureau, and they're using this since private providers can access it cannot access it through the Texas Alliance for Children and Families, and which is the partner organization that focuses on private and child welfare and mental health providers. The Texas Department of Family and Protective Services is primarily reaching out to local mental health agencies, the court systems, the mental health division of the Texas Family Protective Services, adoption staff, etc. And the NTI links are included on adoption contracts as a training resource, essentially. The Texas Alliance for Children and Families, they pretty much do their outreach through their clinical consortium. It's open to all providers statewide and outreach to the Superior Star care providers. So they're trying to cover the whole gamut in terms of child welfare providers, both private and not private, private mental health providers, etc. The full gamut. Next slide, Lisa. So Texas is divided into 11 regions plus the state office. So they've launched it in all of the regions. There's also one well-being specialist per region, which is also counted as part of their catchment or their target. And it includes all adoption and foster staff. So it's quite a number of staff that's either completed the training or is currently completing the NTI training. Next slide, Lisa. Leadership in Texas understood professionals with specialized training in permanency, adoption, foster care, guardianship often do more harm than good to children and families. They note many therapists don't do our kids justice. They don't have the training and experience. For example, not all loss is the same, and breaks in attachment makes it difficult for a child to attach, but attachments can be built and rebuilt.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anyone has had that experience in your area, that the therapists don't really have the skills to adequately address the needs of kids in foster and adoptive relationships.
Somebody
Amen.
said amen.
Yeah, you only have one, Heidi. Okay. Yeah. So it's an issue. We've found that to be true all across the United States.
Indeed. And what the great thing is that the folks from Texas says that NTI covers the majority of their training requirements. So when we shared NTI with them, they were like, "Oh, hallelujah!" So they were very happy that NTI was created. So next slide. The key successes of NTI were or are that it created a shared language for child welfare and mental health professionals in terms of what are the common factors, what are the issues, what are some of the key approaches, what are the challenges, etc. And all adoption and foster care staff essentially completed NTI. NTI is mandatory for adoption staff, essentially. And staff, their response to it is that they feel like they've been well trained in terms of some foundational training about adoption competency. So there was some really good feedback about how this training really fulfills some of the needs of staff. Let's hear a little bit about the feedback. I like the section about how family process and bonding with caregivers. Putting ourselves in their place really puts things into perspective. Acknowledging fears, hesitations reminded me that this is not easy for the child nor the adoptive family. In case practice, I've been able to use this tool more so they feel validated and heard. In some cases, we've taken the process slower to allow the child to adjust to new caregivers while staying in a home. So really focusing on bonding and how important that is. Someone talks about reactive attachment. Thanks for sharing that. I like the info, and it will help me do my job better. I love that really simple sentence. It was also very educational regarding different types of bias we might encounter. Before completing the training, I did not feel I would encounter such things because I believe it could be easy to control our own biases. However, looking back, I was very surprised to find we definitely encounter bias when working with families. We have a section in the training that looks at racial and other biases, and Lisa's going to go through some of that process with you in a minute. Time crunch and staff shortages. You guys probably really know those two are big, big challenges. Trying to fit this training in, trying to fit so many things in terms of your job and your responsibilities, and staff shortages. And yes, that's true. So yes, even in a couple of states that I'm working with, they started out implementing NTI, and then during COVID, they lost so many staff in their regions. And now they're having to back up, get those new staff aboard, and then start again with making NTI mandatory for all new staff. So yes, those challenges indeed happen. Next slide. So I'm curious, what challenges, before we move on, what challenges do you find in your organization? Any challenges when you're talking about trying to implement training and get people trained? You feel free to put those staffing.
Yeah, we've heard that all across the country, especially in the last year, the tremendous staffing crisis all around the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
The virtual world now, no one is engaged. Yeah, that is really tough, isn't it?
Yeah, high caseloads right now to even have them get into more training. Yes, high case, absolutely. And I think COVID has even exacerbated that as well. Those are great responses. One of the questions we asked the Texas folks is, what would you do differently, given what you've experienced thus far with implementation and outreach and et cetera? Leadership felt that it would be wise to reach out to attorneys, guardian ad litem, CASA volunteers, and others that would greatly benefit from NTI, as well as increase advocacy within the court system. So even now we're working with some court system folks across the country, and they're beginning to really get interested. In Idaho, there was a group of court advocates that completed NTI, for example, and they thought it was very helpful. Texas would have encouraged staff to take extra time on the trauma-informed content in NTI. And of course, we have a module on that. They would have engaged within residential services, especially a group that really involved in that side of it, and needing to have more of that trauma-informed kind of training. So, and also incorporate into Permanency Outcomes Project. They have a Permanency Outcomes Project, and they really want to facilitate increased participation. Texas continues to look at ways to integrate NTI system-wise. So they're always looking for new ways to get NTI within their systems. Next slide. So here are the contacts. These are two lovely people that we've been working with in Texas. I know we had a video that Texas actually created. We may not have time to show that, but Sarah Sullivan and Tamara Harris are the key points of contact. If you want to reach these folks, they are happy to talk about NTI, and you'll all get copies of these slides with this contact information as well. So, Lisa, as a result of the bias note, Lisa, tell us a little bit more about race and bias.
Right. So again, Texas had identified race and bias as one of the places that they felt like they needed to do a lot of work. And so we're going to just give you a little glimpse of what's included in the NTI curriculum around that topic. It's a module that we have. So studies of disproportionality in child welfare have shown the following: that African-American children are more likely than the general child population to be represented in care, and once there for longer periods of time. Also, American Indian children are less likely to be placed outside of their home, and youth of color experience longer stays in foster care with more restrictive placements than their white counterparts. So that disproportionality we're seeing across the board, really. In NTI, we talk about biases at work. So these internal biases and belief systems that we bring to our work. The belief that perhaps children should remain with their birth families no matter what. So these are internal biases that we carry that we might not be so aware of, but definitely impact the children and families we work with. The idea that birth parents who abuse, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, don't deserve a chance to change. They just forget it. Once that happens, they are out of the picture and they don't deserve a second chance. The belief that children and youth should only be placed with parents of the same race. Now, that's not to say that we believe that kids should be placed cross-racially, trans-racially. It's just that there has to be some room to consider lots of different families for our kids. The belief that children should always be placed in a more economically advantaged environment. We're just going to place our kids with rich families. That's not necessarily a belief that we want to indulge in. The idea that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So this comes into play when we're talking with prospective foster and adoptive parents about children who come from really hard places and have behaviors associated with those traumas that they've experienced. And that the belief that people from a particular culture have substance abuse issues. And again, we need to sort of crack these biases, open them up, and demythify them, if you will. And we talk about this a lot in NTI. We talk about why race matters in our training. I think for us to be comfortable as professionals, we have to be able to accept the fact that race does in fact matter. It matters to children and it matters to families. It matters because we have a race-conscious society, right? So we're just going to have to be comfortable with the fact that things still are not great, racially speaking. Some things haven't changed. We've got to accept the fact, especially if you're a member of the dominant culture, that there still might be some incriminating things going on in society in letting children know that we know there are issues regarding race. We have to be able to talk about these things with kids. We have to be able to talk about race with families. So the families who come to us and say, we're interested in fostering or adopting, and race just doesn't matter. I'm a white family. I can take, black or brown children, and it won't be an issue in our family. We have to understand that it does make a difference. I think if we accept that reality, we'll make it a little bit easier for our children to have conversations with us about it.
And Lisa, Leanne says religion matters as well. Can be relevant.
Absolutely, religion matters as well, right? Our kids come into the system with a whole history, right? Got a whole bag full of history carrying with them. And we have to be able to talk with them about it and what it means to them and process through with them as well. So what are some of the challenges that transracial adoptive families might face? Maybe put your thoughts in the chat box. And I'll tell you that my husband and I had adopted 2 children from South Korea. So we are a transracial adoptive family. And throughout the years, just had this conversation with someone last night that the issues still come up. When I walk into a restaurant with my daughter, people ask, who is she? Are you girlfriends? More than 30 years apart, we're not really girlfriends. But that question comes up. When my husband and I walk into a restaurant with my 2 adopted Korean children, we're often asked if we want separate checks, assuming that the 2 kids, our 2 children, are dating and, we're just all there together. So these issues come up.
Lisa, I want to share a couple of things in the chat. Age biases that a younger non-kinship home is better for children than the grandparents who tend to be older and with not as much energy. And Magda talks about bullying in the home and school as well.
Yeah, those are challenges for sure. And the older I get, the more I just want to laugh at people who say, older parents can't handle the kids. Now, I'm not sure that I want to be parenting at my age, but I surely have enough energy to do it. And so, when I hear, well, he's 50, she's 50, they're too old, or 60 even, or even 70, for heaven's sakes. I think we've come a lot past that. Oh, wow. Just read an article about a mother and daughter who were pulled off a Southwest flight because the flight attendant suspected the white mother of trafficking her non-white adoptive daughter. Now, how about that for a bias? And what kind of trauma does that do? We have to keep explaining to people why our families are our families and how we matter. Wow, I didn't see that article. That's just horrifying to me. Oftentimes we have the challenge of divided loyalties, right? Between birth and adoptive family members, between the races, who am I? What am I? Especially during adolescence, the sort of questioning that goes into identity, the space between, not feeling an authentic member of either race, not feeling an authentic member of Black or brown culture, Black or brown race, and also aware of the non-white status. How does that impact me? I've talked with a lot of kids who think that they feel white, quote unquote, they feel white. They were raised in an all-white family, an all-white community, but they don't present it. They don't look it. And so there's a prejudice that comes along with that. And then facing the idea that they have to face prejudice and discrimination from all sides. How do I fit in? Where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Race, class, birth family connection. So these interactions with birth families sometimes make the interracial adoptee feel uncomfortable. They have that juxtaposition of race, class, and identity sometimes in their relation to their adopted status. How do I fit in? How do I belong? Who am I more like? Oh my gosh, I grew up in a different class than my biological parents are living. That could really create some challenges for our kids. Did I skip? Whoops, common traits of microaggressions. So I'm sure you guys have all heard of microaggressions. These are the little picky things that happen on a day-to-day basis that really have an impact on our kids. Microaggressions are dismissive of an individual or group's experience. Oh no, you don't think that. That it wasn't so bad for you because you grew up in a white family. That's a microaggression. Invalidating through comparison, self or other groups. That's a microaggression. A stereotype that's based on race. Oh, wow, your son is so articulate. And, you know, at the end of that, at the end of the sentence, it's sort of that unspoken, because he's Black. You know, that's a horrible microaggression. It's a horrible stereotype. The stated dissociation with societal issues at play. I don't pay attention to politics. I don't pay attention to color. I'm colorblind. It's not true. It's not respectful of culture and race. Thinking that we'll only be able to be close to individuals from backgrounds we are comfortable around. You know, comfort is good. It's, you know, we all like to be comfortable, but we can be comfortable with other people who are not like us, for sure. So I just want to read this real quick. Edna, Eileen says, my daughter, raised in an all-white family, was surprised when she first encountered racist comments when she went away to school. As long as she's home in our home environment, she was treated by people in our town as an honorary white person. How about that? But once out on her own, she began to feel treated differently as a member of an ethnic minority. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I remember my daughter saying that when she got to college, people wanted to know where she was from and, you know, why does she speak such good English? Because she's Asian. Yeah. So how do we address microaggressions? Again, this is all built into the NTI training, and this is just a little bit of a snapshot. Sometimes we can address microaggressions by saying, oh, that statement hit me kind of funny. And I don't mean like funny, ha-ha, I mean like kind of weird. You can follow up with saying, why do you feel that way? Or why do you say that? Or, you know, why do you ask? These questions that sort of put people on the spot. You can say, your language is problematic because, you know, my kids are not Oriental. Orientals are for carpets, right? Kind of a, yeah. You can say, I feel, or my experience has taught me. You can talk about the dangers of colorblind rearing strategies. There's a story that we incorporate in the training of Alex Landau. The importance of stepping back from family or friends who say racially problematic things. If you have family members who continually denigrate the race, any race or culture other than the white majority, it might be important to step away from them. The idea of internalized racism, believing in stereotypes about one's own race and thinking that those things apply to them as well, impacts a child's self-esteem, self-concept, and their ability to feel confident in the world. So some tips to help children overcome internalized racism: have a diverse group of friends and provide racial mirrors for your kids. Embrace bicultural identities. Talk positively about your child's birth family. These are all tips for helping families combat that internalized racism. So lots of ideas here. Reaching out and finding racial mirrors for your children. Connect them with mentors who share their ethnic and racial backgrounds, or as somebody mentioned, religious as well. Enlist the help of other parents who share your child's race. Create a safe space for your children to form friendships with other children who are like them. And if you're seeking clinical help, find a therapist of your child's race when possible. This is a little more challenging, I've found, in many communities across the country. But, you know, with online therapy, with this model of Zoom therapy, it's becoming more and more possible. And we're going to tell you about our NTI trained therapist directory as well. Understanding that connection between racial identity and well-being, super important. The child's history is important. Where they came from is important. And considering this in placement decisions makes sense. Choosing the most appropriate treatment options when they are in need of mental health professional support, really important. Taking the time to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. As therapists, as child welfare workers, host or attend open forums and invite your partners to learn more about diversity issues facing these kids and families. And we've included some resources here, and as Edna said, you will get the slides.
Yeah.
Okay, Edna, NTI in Oklahoma.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully there are no spots here. I know my internet is a little bit unstable today, but let's talk about Oklahoma. That's another that implemented NTI, and they were one of our host sites. This site also involved some tribes from Indian country as well. So it was a mixture in terms of the populations that were involved, in terms of the target populations, as well as the staff. Oklahoma has a specialized counseling center for children and families from adoption and foster care. And that was one center that really focused on implementing the training. They range of knowledge and skills and values really needed to serve. NTI was a great fit in terms of looking at all of the knowledge and skills necessary for that. And the family's experiences in the community with other professionals wasn't as positive as they would have liked for it to have been, and they wanted it to really foster a more positive experience for their clients. Next slide, Lisa.
Okay, Edna, I think we got stuck for a minute there.
Yeah, I got stuck for a minute there. I don't know where I ended, but let's move on to the next slide. Sorry. I hate this. How did these folks in Oklahoma get introduced to NTI? We saw them at the NACYAC conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and the interest of the child well leadership and the awareness of the gaps in mental health treatment available to their kids was really a key part of them wanting to implement NTI. And this conference actually was the first ever combined conference with both child welfare and mental health professionals in one place. So what a great place to talk about both sides and talk about shared language. So this was an excellent opportunity to present to folks about NTI. So Oklahoma became really excited. So how did this NTI change their practice? They reported deepened awareness of intake and assessment, what they need to do, what they need to pay attention to, what things they might need to change, broaden the understanding of the role of biological families. So again, how important biological families are in this process. Expanded awareness of adoption and development, child development, those things. Highlighted the need for specific tools to help kids grieve multiple losses through attachment. This is a big piece that's always reported as a big need and a big desire in terms of training and deeper understanding. It spurred practitioners to realize the need for systems, collaboration, and facilitation. Oh boy, collaborating with systems, especially when we talk about referrals and reporting and documentation and communication. So all those things were really critical things that really changed their practice, the way of doing things there in Oklahoma. Next slide, Lisa. So what they were taking on or working on, they focused on building a network of mental health providers who want to learn more or deepen their understanding of adoption competency, which really was a core sort of approach or core need for the state of Oklahoma and this organization. They're working on case consultation and definitely crisis intervention, which certainly this organization was involved in from time to time in working with these populations. And collaboration and networking across counties, because a lot of systems are county-based, right? So especially when you look at rural and urban areas. So they're really working on the networking and collaboration communication across counties as well. So next slide. Overall benefits of NTI. Of course, it's a free web-based training that can be shared with other clinicians. We encourage people to share it with other clinicians in terms of learning about the training and the importance of the training. There are resources that can be used immediately for children and families. Lots of handouts, fact sheets, things that you can immediately use with your families. We talk about all kinds of tools for attachment, things that you can immediately use. There's a broad range of evidence-based or evidence-informed interventions that are appropriate for this population. We have lots of information on those interventions, as well as fact sheets, resource sheets, all kinds of things built into the training that you can download and print and save. The training builds awareness of the broad framework that encompasses all aspects of adoption and provides practical each area. We talk a lot about post-adoption support, all kinds of level of support throughout the continuum. So these were the overall benefits of NTI that Oklahoma thought was really important to note.
Yeah, and Edna, I just want to reiterate, this training really is appropriate to every and any kind of adoption. Foster care, guardianship, international adoption, domestic infant adoption, kinship adoption, customary adoption in our tribes. It really does address all of those situations throughout the training.
Absolutely. And this is the point of contact. Bunny got with the University of Oklahoma. As a matter of fact, she just received an award from the Children's Bureau for her work. And she also does a lot of presentations with us as well. So Bonnie is a good friend of NTI, and I think if you contact her, you would definitely get some great information, and your questions would certainly be answered in a most energetic way. So we certainly suggest that you follow up with Bonnie if you have questions.
Okay, Edna, you want to talk a little bit about loss and grief?
Yeah.
This module.
Yeah, we have a module that really focuses on loss and grief, and this was one of the areas that Oklahoma talked about in terms of what their staff could really use support and help around, and our tools that we have in the training were really useful. When we talk about loss and grief, we always talk about the tools necessary to help children grieve multiple losses as well as work through attachment. So NTI really provides strategies and tools that will help professionals and parents support grieving children to mitigate losses and to help children, youth, and families uncover hope and healing, because loss and grief is really sort of this foundational kind of piece around all of this when you think about children having multiple moves, multiple placements, and what that really, how that really affects loss and grief. So loss and grief is really hard. And because of the ambiguity, there's often hope of reconciliation and the feeling of living in limbo. With this hope, children and youth cannot grieve with the loss because the loss is not fully recognized. So it's important to recognize the loss and how to really address it. So let's talk a little bit about the symptoms of an ambiguous loss. It if you look through this list, it looks a lot like those of PTSD. A common diagnosis given to youth in foster care, adoption, and guardianship. According to Paul, the greater the ambiguity surrounding one's loss, the more difficult it is to master the more difficult it is to master, and the greater one's depression, anxiety, and family conflict. So you must consider what it means for a child who has been removed from their birth family. All of these things are really symptoms of ambiguous loss. And we, again, really try to come up with tools and strategies for healing loss. You'll see some of these listed here: genograms, journey maps, loss or memory box, where kids are putting items into a box that are really important to them, probably throughout all of their moves, storyboards and life books. In some of our trainings, we actually have staff or participants do a storyboard. And then we have two activities, the Bird's Nest and Mr. Nobody. So all of these tools and things are embedded into NTI, and it really gives you a map or a way to use these with your families and with the youth that you're working with. Any of these tools you're familiar with? Any of these sound familiar to you at all? And this is just a sampling of tools that are suggested to work with families. Anything that you use when you're working to address healing and loss, feel free to use those or put those in the chat box as well. I see a couple of comments and it just disappeared. Anything, Lisa?
Yeah, so we struggle when different children have the same loss and are grieving differently. So so siblings. So I'm guessing that maybe some of them are really struggling and maybe acting out in really significant ways, and maybe another child in the sibling group tends to withdraw, and oftentimes both of those behaviors are sort of misunderstood by foster and adoptive parents. The child who's acting out is seen as manipulative, obstinate, defiant, and the child who withdraws is seen as having either an attachment issue or super compliant, and they really like that. But, you know, a super compliance is also not a great thing. It feels good to the parent because there's a less of a behavior problem, but, you know, kids are really not designed to be super compliant at all times. And that could be a signal of that unresolved, unacknowledged loss and grief that they're struggling with.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And again, all of these are embedded in the training, and we have instructions and handouts and tools for each of these and more in the training, so as well. And they're great tools to use. Yeah, so Lisa, let's talk about Massachusetts.
We'll talk about Massachusetts. I just want to say just really quickly, things like the storyboards and life books have been used pretty frequently across our sites that we've been working with. Storyboards help a child tell the story of their life. Life books are meant to create a journal of the child's life and depict both the positive things and the not so great things in their life. A journey map helps a child understand where they were, where they came from, and where they're going, and maybe where they land as well. A loss or a memory box. I really like this activity, Edna. I think we've demonstrated it before. Getting a shoebox and decorating it perhaps, and maybe filling it with things that are important that the child can carry wherever they go. And then really being thoughtful about making sure that the child's memory box travels with them if they have to move from place to place.
Yeah.
So again, really great tools built into the NTI. And we've got directions and demos and all kinds of things that will make it easier for you to share.
Yeah, yeah, I always think about the good goodbye letter too, Lisa, that we
Right.
use.
Yeah.
And this just really talks about what it was like to have that kid in your home, and the memories you share, and the things that were important about their time spent there. I always share the story. We were in Seattle or somewhere, and we had a group of people who were doing a good goodbye letter, since they had all worked with families or kids that were about to either move from a foster care to adoption situation or to another adoption home, and really craft a letter. Of course, I had one woman who was leaving that training, and she was going to Chicago to break up with her boyfriend. And her goodbye letter was a good goodbye letter to her boyfriend. I'm like, okay, I guess that activity helped her in that transition. But anyway, I always laugh about that experience. But anyway, Lisa, let's talk about Massachusetts.
Okay, that's a great story. That's a great story, Edna. And I mean, good goodbyes happen all over the place, but really important for our kids. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, another one of our sites that are integrating NTI within their system. I've been really excited to be working with Massachusetts. So they have put a tremendous emphasis on permanency from the start. So from the very moment a child becomes, there becomes an awareness of a child who's in a difficult situation, permanency is absolutely the first goal. So this is a priority of the Department of Children and Families Commissioner, as well as the governor's office. So, in situations like this, when we have the commissioner and the governor full force behind a program like NTI, integrating a program like NTI, we really get great results and get them pretty quickly. The permanency goals are established as a part of the agency improvement leadership team and aligned with the CFSR program improvement plan as well. So really, again, embedded into their policy and their practices and their improvement plans. Massachusetts says they participate in NTI because it's entirely consistent with our permanency priorities. And that feels like a really good thing for us, but it's been really beneficial for the state as well. So they've recently redesigned the initial placement review process for children in out-of-home placement, looking at NTI and the resources built into the training, and are in process of redesigning their permanency planning conferences to, again, take a closer look and a more effective look at their practice. I think I'm gonna cross my fingers and hope this works. This is just a really sweet little, very quick video that demonstrates a concept of how we see things and how they're interpreted. Let's see if we could get that to work. Stop that share and then come back to here.
That face that is usually covered by her phone has finally made an appearance.
And then okay, and then I'm going to share this. She's so darn cute. So just a sweet little video. This little girl's early life experiences taught her one thing, right? How to get hand sanitizer. We've all been doing that a lot, haven't we? And how even though the expected result doesn't happen, she does not get the hand sanitizer from the little LED light or from the the brick planter. She reacts in the same way. She rubs her hands together as if she got the hand sanitizer. And we know why she's doing what she's doing. It's a learned behavior, right? Something happened and she knows how to react. And a lot of our kids from their early life experiences can relate to this. So we have to work to understand what their experience was. How did it affect their world? How do they see their world? And how can we sort of start to realign their behavior with what is reality? Right? Sometimes we sort of have that idea like, I just don't get it. I've never done such and such or said this or that, but why do they keep doing the same thing? Or I say the same thing over and over again and they just don't get it. Mm-hmm. Both of these things are true, right? So just a cute little illustration of that concept. So in Massachusetts, they have a strong belief that the process of adoption is lifelong, that what went before they come to their adoptive family or guardianship family or kinship family matters. It makes a difference. What we carry with us matters. That adoptees need to be able to make sense of their stories, have to learn how to tell their stories. They have to understand their stories. We need to know and understand the triggers for the child. Well, the child, the parents, and our own triggers. What sets us off? What makes us feel anxious or annoyed? What makes the parents feel anxious or annoyed, right? Oftentimes there's the same things, but we have to really be understanding of what lies underneath the behavior of the child and get to the source. So this is what Massachusetts has been really concentrating on. They're looking at post-adoption supports, and they have these different teams and different ways of providing that. They have rapid response teams, parent liaisons and mentors. They have parent groups and kids groups, and they have respite as well. The respite, not in the traditional sense, but whatever alleviates the stress in the current dynamics. So respite sort of, maybe the child goes to a friend's house for the day, or maybe a friend comes over and brings their kids and stays there while mom goes and gets her hair done or something like that. They are committed to providing adoption competent services, adoption competent mental health services. So services that are helpful. Not all help is helpful. And we've, sort of talked a little bit about this. In all my years of doing this adoption permanency work, I can't tell you how many times a family comes to me and says, well, my last therapist told me, this isn't what you got into adoption for. Maybe you ought to give the child back. And those are, honestly, those are the exact words. Maybe you should give the child back. And I always think, give the child back to whom? Where are we giving children back to? It's not like you're returning a sweater that you don't like, right? Or you ordered it online and it doesn't fit. We don't return children. We don't traumatize children. We don't hurt children, right? And Massachusetts is committed to this. They feel it's important to know the impact of resurfacing trauma that comes up over and over again, that's triggered by sights and smells and sounds, and then causes behaviors. What's the safety plan? We in Massachusetts are encouraging contracted vendors to participate in the Nti training, whether they're child welfare or mental health training. And in a number of the sites that we've worked with, Edna and I have had the experience where the state systems are requiring their contracted mental health providers, behavioral health providers, to complete the Nti training or risk not being being awarded a contract in the future. So a really important step for the mental health professionals for the child welfare professionals to sort of make that stand. We need you to be, understanding of the issues that are going on for our kids. In Massachusetts, how has it changed our practice? As I said, they're revising their approach to partnerships and parenting. That's their pre-adopt, pre-foster care training. And they're aligning it with NTI. The department's staff have all completed NTI and they've reported this. They feel more sensitive to the preparation of children for their permanency goals, helping children understand where they've come from and where they're going. The initial placement review format and questions were influenced by NTI, and their permanency planning conference is under revision, in alignment with NTI. How are they using materials? We refer to them frequently. We have staff who have downloaded and saved the resources. And I think, Edna, you mentioned this, that tons and tons of resources in NTI. You can go into a lesson, you could download whatever it is that's in there that you feel like will be useful in your practice and share it. Everything has been vetted and approved to distribute and share. Everything that's in NTI's training has been approved for distribution by any staff who wants to use it with in training with other staff or with children and families as well. And again, incorporating the life books. What they count among their successes, their commitment to NTI, integrated into their response to their critical high profile case. They had a really tough case in Massachusetts and felt that NTI was integral in that. NTI was integrated into the most recent planning review. NTI was noticed and achieved traction with COVID. Everything's online. This has been a great format. This has really been, the silver lining for the work that Edna and I have been doing, because the training options were not so readily available during COVID. Yeah. They're creating permanency specialist positions. They're requiring completion of NTI for certain jobs and promotions, which is really interesting. They're implementing a coaching program to assist with transfer of learning. I don't think we've really mentioned that, but we do have coaching and supervision training supports that Edna and I have been also doing for many of our states. And as with the NTI training, our supervisor and coaching support is free. Yeah. A no-brainer, right? Sharon Sylvia and Etta Lappin Davis are our contacts in Massachusetts. And again, if you are interested in learning how others have utilized NTI or have integrated it into their systems, they would be happy to speak with you as well. And you're going to have a copy of the slides and their contact information.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. As you might imagine, when families come for help, as they reach the end of their ropes, they can appear to be very dysfunctional. Professionals may think, how did parents ever get approved to adopt a child? So truly, truly, adoption competency, as we have described it, really, really helps to save lives and saves families as they're going through these processes and as going through the fears and frustrations, so to speak. So when we talk about shared language, Lisa, the next slide, sometimes from time to time, a child enters a welfare system to post-adoption guardianship. When they enter that system, collaboration is so key to enhancing permanency and well-being. When you talk about the different systems, the different agencies, and sometimes these agencies, a lot of times, agencies, individuals, areas speak a totally different language, not understanding grief and loss, not understanding the impact of multiple moves, maybe not understanding all of the mental health challenges that go along with adoption, guardianship, and kids in foster care. So it is just so key to enhancing permanency and well-being throughout the same spectrum. Speaking of shared language is key, especially between service providers and professionals along the full continuum, including mental health and child welfare. So we ask the question as you think about your systems, and the question is, when you think about collaboration and speaking a shared language about adoption, competency, and all those things within, what would get in the way of collaboration in your area? Feel free to use the chat box. What would get in the way, or what has gotten in the way when you're collaborating with all those different systems, especially when we talk about child welfare and mental health? What gets in the way of collaboration? Any thoughts about that in terms of what systems you're working within? Money. Whoa, yes. Money is always a key factor, especially when you're talking about dwindling pots or uncertainty around funding allocations. Somebody's giving us a 20-minute reminder. Thank you, Leanne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rural, low number of partners, they're stretched. Yeah.
Yes. Money is honey. You got that right, Leanne.
Yeah.
We need more money. Yes. Yes.
Need more money. So
yes,
resources, right? And
yeah.
I mean, I think there have been a number of agencies and child welfare systems we've talked to across the country who talk about the crisis in, as you said earlier, staff shortages, lack of resources. The training is free, but it does take time. And so that becomes an issue in times. But you know, collaborating with between the systems, child welfare and mental health, how do you make those connections?
Yes, absolutely. And one person talked about rural areas, and I can really identify with that, having growing up in a rural area. So such lack of resources, and really having to go 30 miles, 40 miles, and even as far as Chapel Hill or Durham, 2 hours away to really connect with the resources you need for families. So yes, absolutely. Not having the foster adoptive families with enough trainings and resources for prevention before a crisis occur. Absolutely. That is certainly a big piece. Time, accountability, and lack of empathy. Very good point. And accountability is really critical as well. And people are really stretched so thin. I think we talked about this earlier with folks from the regions, having to do so many things within a certain period of time. And then when you look at training, it's an added layer on top of that. So much going on. So there are a lot of things that could get in the way. But despite it all, we have to find a way to really collaborate and connect with those key entities that can make this process so better and really benefit our family. So ask these questions of you. As you think about your communities, your agencies, the part of your world, who would you need to bring to the table in terms of having these discussions or collaborating or building a system that really addresses the needs of your families? Who would you need to bring to the table? And these are just questions that we ask because they definitely need to be considered. How would you get them there, so to speak? Would that be a reach out to them, or would that be a one-on-one, having lunch, or is it a coalition kind of thing? How do you get them there? And feel free to share in the chat box, because one of the things that we're really focusing on in the coming months is how do we get more mental health providers trained in NTI? How do we get the mental health side of things better connected, sharing one language with child welfare, and having those discussions about who we need to talk to, who we need to bring to the table to at least have the conversation, or to at least make them aware of this training. And how do you pull it all together for implementation? How do you bring people to the table for implementation? For example, in South Carolina, the South Carolina Department of Social Services and Mental Health have worked closely together, wherein all of the mental health providers were required to complete the NTI training. It was unbelievable. It was one of those really coordinated sessions where all of the folks came together and said, okay, we need this and we have to make it mandatory for people to complete this training and work together. So I don't see anything in the chat box. If we would love your thoughts around that, but these are key questions that we believe that people should be asking. And it's not just in my own little corner, in my own little world, in my own little chair. It's all pulling all the key people together that are serving our families and our youth. Being from Oklahoma, someone just said something. I know for a fact that frontline staff and mental health services are not invited for NTI training instead of just licensed therapists. My apologies here, my other phone was ringing.
Well, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. And the NTI training, if you like to access it, and maybe email Edna about that, and she can follow up. But if you are interested in completing the NTI, enrolling and completing the NTI training, you do not have to be associated with any organization. You can access it through our learning management system. And again, Edna can get you that information, how to do it.
Absolutely.
And also, I think maybe follow up with Oklahoma.
Yeah,
what's that about?
We do need to do that. Absolutely. Someone mentioned, what opportunities do families have in this training? From an adoptive parent, foster family, and a person who connects with these families across our state, we know that we do not get enough training. Absolutely. And I know that NTI, or not NTI, CASE has access to training for parents as well. So we would love to provide that link to that training as well. Lisa, I don't have it in front of me, but there is a parent training that we've been involved with and been in partnership with, that we can share that with you.
I'll get that to the conference organizers for sure.
Great. So yes, there is a training, and yes, that is something at every conference where we present. Is there training for parents? Can parents use this training? There are so many resources embedded in this training, though, that providers can use with parents. So I want to reiterate that. There were two other messages. Let me cursor down. Sorry. Forgive me. Okay. Yes. We got the contact for Oklahoma, and we'll be following up with that for sure. What other questions do you have about so far? And we're going to have to wrap up soon, I know, but any questions or thoughts? And we'll tell you a little bit more about how to access the training in a minute. Any questions, comments, things you'd like to know that maybe we didn't answer thus far? If not, keep it on push, Lisa. What's the next slide?
Yep. So we have, this is our access to NTI's web-based training. And I'm going to put that in the chat box as well. It's very simple, very easy. And hey, folks, it's free. So give that a look. And then, do you want to tell them about the directory of professionals?
Yes, absolutely. The NTI website includes a directory of child welfare and mental health professionals throughout the country that have completed NTI. So we encourage all of our completers to submit their name and contact information to this directory. So it's actually a directory of names, where they're affiliated, their role. Most of these are actual licensed providers who are built within the NTI directory. This is a great referral resource for child welfare staff and families as well. So we encourage you to look at this directory. Maybe you're looking for a person in your state or in your area that's completed NTI and may find someone within this directory. I think it's several hundred folks that are actually in this directory. We've had calls into our office about adoption competent or adoption folks who have actually completed training, especially mental health providers, and we refer them to this resource. So this is a way that we capture folks that have actually completed the training, and it's a great resource. So I want to really direct you to that as well when you go to our website. So next slide, Lisa. And this is our contact information. You'll be getting these slides. Lisa has put our email addresses in the chat box. Please, we want you to call us. We want you to email us because we would love to present to your organization. We can send you more information. Oftentimes, someone will say, Edna, I need for you to present this to my staff or to other folks in my agency. We would love to do that. Or we can refer you to a source in your state that may already have an NTI embedded into their learning management system. So do call on us. We're here to support you in any way possible. And we're so happy that you chose to spend this time with us this evening during the conference. And we're certainly here to support you in any way possible. And check out NTI. We think you'll really like what it has to offer. Lisa?
Thank you so much. Appreciate your being here and taking the time to listen and learn about NTI. And as Edna said, we'd be happy to work with you. We are implementation specialists. It's our job to help you implement in your state, agency, entity. And our services are paid for by the Children's Bureau and free to use. So please do feel free to utilize us. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your conference.